Okay. So this is about tools, etc., which we learned previous class. And so today, with continuation, what we'll try to see is we'll try to understand a little bit about frameworks, and then specific to UFA framework, we'll try to understand, and we'll just talk about more about UFA framework, right? So by now, we have seen how HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are essential for building any web application. So any app which are running on browser, um, simply what we have to do is we have to have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript as the backbone of any applications. So all the frameworks, irrespective of it. So a simple advantage they provide is so if we use HTML, we can get the UI, and with CSS, we saw that how that UI can be made more useful. Like you can use with calculator example, we have seen like how we can drastically improve the overall appearance of a single application, etc. So CSS has a place in the design, so it makes a appealing design. So to build great design, so UX it improves the user experience. And with JavaScript, we also understood that we can have some create functions, etc. So reusable codes we can create, and which can be used for across various scenarios. So any logical part, if we want to write, so we generally write with JavaScript. And we understood that class is approach, using which class is a approach which we use CSS, and external CSS is a go-to way for defining and accessing CSS files, and all ends with .css. So this is what the quick wrap of what CSS can do. And similarly, here also we have seen that all we use is functions in general. So reusable functions are custom functions we define. And here also using external CSS, external JavaScript file, using it, script file we use it. For CSS we use link tag, whereas here we use script tag. So external JavaScript we are going to use. And if you notice, all these three are like individual notepad files we could just create and we could just play around. But is it scalable? So if we have lots of complex scenarios to build, so we cannot actually maintain these files individually. So for that purpose, what we basic structure what we do is we follow MVC pattern. So generally model view control we call it as. So this is the general so every framework will adopt one or the other principle. So how do we gradually, if we have to increase our project, etc. So there should be a way to handle them, for frequent changes. If you have to make any changes in the UI, you need to understand where exactly you have to make a change, whether in the CSS part you have to make a change or whether you have to make a change in JavaScript. So user has to be understand on an ongoing basis to easily maintain the code. So for that case, model view controller is one approach. So what exactly model view controller is? Like all the data. So in our case, our data lies in OData service. So in our case, OData is our model. So all our the required data is hosted in our SAP backend, and we are going to expose it via OData channel, and we are going to store it in a model. Okay. So this is the general approach how our data resides. And view is a place it's equivalent to our HTML. So in our case, it will be XML. All the XML tags currently UFI uses XML tags. So they are equivalent to HTML, but in our case, they are in based on XML tags. Similarly, the control, the logic part, we write in JavaScript itself. And nowhere we are going to explicitly use CSS. So we're going to have one more folder within the structure to manage CSS, but key components of our project are controller, which manage the JavaScript logic, and view for designing the UI elements, and the data which is residing in the SAP backend, which collectively we call it as MVC framework, right? So this is how UI5 framework work, is being built right now, right? So now this is one aspect of the framework. So other aspect of framework is we understood like all the controls in HTML are very basic controls. So if we are seeing, we are not actually having much rich control sets. So any new change you have to write a number of logics to it. Like for providing some, always I take this example of button. So for make it easy to understand. So button controls, etc. Always when we see it just has a button and a press event. Whereas in framework they offer you 6 to 8 types of different buttons and lots of controls. So we have flexibility here. Max you might have 100 controls, whereas frameworks offers you unlimited options. So every now and then they'll, if we are frequently using certain scenario, they'll make it as a custom control. So that flexibility frameworks uh, generally offer. Okay. So that's the reason UFI frameworks. Second thing is they provide rich control sets, so which makes our development quicker and easy. Correct. So instead of traditional HTML framework based buttons, etc., will have lots of properties, etc., and we are not going to use HTML tags at all, and we are going to use all the framework tags. So no usage of, we can still use HTML tags if you want, but we generally already have more better controls. All controls are available in already the framework, so we generally use the framework controls, not so we do not use at all. So do not use HTML controls while using framework. Okay, prefer always framework because they come with some additional advantages. So we'll see in, now today we'll do see a basic exercise. So what all advantages they provide as such. So frameworks provided controls. So this is about in short snapshot of uh, how, why we are preferring, instead of building HTML, HTML CSS JavaScript, why we are going for a framework. So it makes us to organize our project as we are scaling up, and at the same time it provides lots of control options which makes our development easy and generally better to build business applications. So a quick comparison of so how, where exactly the UFI framework stands in terms of overall building of apps, etc. So we say that than HTML, UFI offers lots of flexibility, lots of control. But is it as good or as competitive as the rest of the frameworks available in JavaScript community? So a quick view is, this is how the so this can be debatable as well always. So there is no official benchmark as such. But as per Google Trends, etc., every last year and this year, when we see React stands on the top in current last year stats as such. So complete 2020, most of the people were searching for React.js, and most of the community are building open source projects across in React.js. So React.js has, every framework has some particular type of benefit as if you see MVC pattern support, etc. For OpenUF, SAPUF, and Angular, they have MVC, they follow MVC pattern. Whereas React is not completely supports MVC pattern. It might follow MVV format. So they, for every framework follow certain approaches of building the applications, etc. And there could be like now we talked about single page application. So whether they support single page application, almost all of them support. And React, the way they handle single page applications, we discussed earlier, like what are single page applications. So single index file will have as components for rest of the every library will be loaded, so in a single index file. So that's how single page applications using Bootstrap they can be built responsive applications. So where they have rich responsive control set. So control set wise, SCPFI has more control set compared to Angular or React. But at the same time, there's a problem as well. So native development, etc. space than SAP, they far better. So they're like some comparisons here and there. But simple funda is like all the open source developers use Angular or React and not SAP UFI. Likewise, in the SAP community, for most of the business applications, uh, as on date, they rely on SAP UFI and not on Angular or React. So this is how the contradictory way we have it. Okay. So there is no good or bad as such, but in SAP also is, staggered manner they are trying to support Angular and React also for building business applications. So how do they do it? So for that they introduce something called web components. So web component is completely latest, where if you are already familiar with Angular or React and you would like to complement using UFI, then there's given a support of you can build your application completely in Angular, and you can use the controls of SAP UFI controls as well. So how do we use it? So see, traditional date picker, this is how it looks. Okay. So if we go to ufi.sap.com, so if you check for set, for example, for selecting date, so we have a control called date picker. So what date picker does is it provides this standard instead of just a text field. It provides a um, calendar control where you can directly select year and March in an interactive way. So this is a control. So in order to use this, this is how we generally use. So date picker is a tag which we use to you know add to it. So if you simply add a date picker here, we'll be able to show. So maybe AngularJS may not have this particular this kind of interactive way of date picker. It might have a different version of it. So if at all we wanted to use certain controls from UFA and certain controls from AngularJS as such, then SAP now enabled to use such a way. So in order to define it, all you have to do is if you are using Angular, then you have to define UFI date picker as a control. So if you use it this way within AngularJS, you can straight away directly consume UFI controls as well. That means now your number of controls which you can use right now will exponentially increase. There is one more catch to this web components approach as well. So this is very new, and that it's not it's not very mature as well. So we may not see many use cases using this approach, and it might evolve going forward as well. But we are just trying to understand how to better leverage frameworks. Okay, so web components out of 850 controls currently, I think around 100 controls only are available as web components. When we say web components, subset of 850 controls SAP is providing as web components. That means they can be utilized along with uh, other frameworks. You might be asking, should we, learn different frameworks as well? So this is not as meant for. So to bridge the gap, like I was mentioning, right? So we have outside developer community as well. And if you wanted to build business applications, you cannot actually ignore a larger audience out there. So you need the best of both worlds. So what they're trying to is SAP UFI with existing SAP developer community, they can start building it. At the same time, outside developer community, if any business wants to build their application in React, SAP has to support that particular format as well. So what SAP trying to play is you have whatever developer skill set. So we always provide you the right tools so that you can build business application using any technology or any programming language. So that's how they wanted to keep the flexibility, because they cannot actually restrict that only use UFI to build applications in the future. So in the future, they wanted to make sure that any JavaScript framework. So if you learn the JavaScript principles and if you could master any of the JavaScript concepts, it should be pretty much easy to use the control sets. So might be UFI might be shipping some controls and Angular might have some more better controls going forward. And if you want to leverage those capabilities, SAP should support such a paradigm as well. So in that case, to meet those scenarios, so SAP is trying to start its own project in that area as well. It might not be very popular as such. Web components. So this is a page for web components. So if you see, these are the controls, just like how we had an API. So list control, if you have to use UEFI.list, this is how we can use list control in AngularJS, etc. And they're like certain controls. Like I said, out of all 850 controls are not available. There are like hardly less than 100 controls available right now. So basic blocks, whatever we use, so all are available as web components. Okay. And for illustration, they have given this is a page where you can refer to this web components approach. So is it? I mean, you're able to understand what web components is and what role it plays.
Yeah, got an overview of it. Yeah.
Okay, so here's a simple funda is now today UFI framework we are using it, and if you are already familiar, you're coming from some you're now today we are starting with JavaScript, but tomorrow if we are already familiar with AngularJS and we are using multiple framework libraries, then SAP is trying to provide platform for those developers as well. If you're coming with the multiple skill sets, then you can leverage the best of both worlds. So how do we leverage SAP wants to give a try? So if you see here, they have given some all the three frameworks. So here I have mentioned about Angular and React, but there is Vue.js also. So Vue.js and React.js and Angular. So any framework can become the mainstream framework, and SAP do not want to isolate itself from any framework as such. So it wants to allow all the developer communities. So like in the open world, it wants to attract the open source developer community. So if there are like lots of projects being done in the open source community, it wants to leverage and tap the talent out there, and it wants to use that for building business. They want other outside developers also to build SAP solutions and business applications so that it benefits larger of its customers.
Yeah,
If you
looks like
see,
SAP wants to build, like a base like Apple apps
correct.
where.
Right. It has to make its market look very lucrative. So if you can build some solutions and which you can sell for SAP customers, then definitely developer community also they'll focus, right. So not only individual developers, there will be firms which will build solutions. So currently there are like exclusively SAP solution business solutions providers. Like if you see any, there are like third party vendors, so many vendors. They offer in the marketplace, SAP marketplace, directly they'll provide their solutions. Usually those solutions were compatible only for the SAP. Okay. So there are like so many other providers who build apps. If you see any app, if it is built, they build for both iOS platform and Android platform, right? Because to monetize. So if when you are getting same, if a game, if you take, if you're able to sell it on two platforms, if you have to build an app, definitely in iOS you'll use Swift. JavaScript framework equivalent one is Swift for in iOS, and in case of Android it is Angular. So there are like Polymer and other frameworks as well, JavaScript frameworks. But you have to build the whole code in Swift. Then only you can actually place it in iOS Play Store and you can sell it that particular game, right?
Mhm.
Now, if currently the scenario how is like if you are an SAP, you're building a solution for SAP that cannot be portable to any other platforms. So the vendors out there are always building solutions only for SAP. Okay, or there is a considerable delay if there is some new solution offered in .NET or any other place, and SCP alone had to drive majority of the business scenarios, etc. But it cannot keep pace with the outside world, right? So there are like lots of new solutions. Like if you see in India 2 years back, GST came into picture. So SAP cannot deliver solution outright, and business may not be interested in SAP solution. They look for outside any better solution is there. So if they can install it, I can purchase it, and they can install as an add-on on top of SAP, they'll be very happy. So you need to give multiple options, right, to purchase. If SAP says no, this is the GST software I'm giving it, you have to use only this software. If you say, they may not purchase SAP license itself. You're understanding, right? The cascading effect of
Yeah, yeah.
avoiding certain point-to-point solutions. Maybe SAP as a whole package solution, it might help you solve some solutions, but some new anything comes into picture, market, some new regulations, some anything new to specific region, etc. You need to have multiple solutions available, and you should allow your customers to purchase those solutions. So to attract the developer community or other smaller vendors, so then they need to have the tools available as well. If your small vendor is interested in building application in Angular and your SAP doesn't support, um, He cannot build a solution quickly. He might be able to build, but the deadline he may not meet. So then they'll prefer for going for other vendors. Like instead of SAP, let's use some other Salesforce where we can use open source technology tools and we can build application and it supports. So they'll prefer a Salesforce for this particular GST implementation, etc. So newer approaches, etc. Also, if SAP ecosystem has to support, they need to have platform open to all kinds of developers and all kinds of vendors. So it's like longer play. It's not as it quickly with this solution everybody is going to move this stack as such. SAP should support. So we are trying to understand what SAP is doing in its own way uh, to provide some tools, etc. Maybe all this thing may not be supported in the long run. These are like multiple projects where the ongoing projects they do, and the direction can change any day. So if you see all these controls like list or expanding, date picker, etc., are built using this web component itself. This is basically a React application, and it has been built. It looks like just like an UF application. So all the buttons, etc., because they use web components. And just for illustration, you can check same app. This is if you see the logo here. This is how you based on React, and in Angular also it doesn't look any different. So sorry. So it looks the same. So what end user sees is it for them it is always a Fiori application. It looks like a Fiori application. So as long as it looks the same, there is no problem for SAP, right? You see the output of React.js, Vue.js, etc. Everywhere
Right.
it looks the same application. There is no difference at all.
Mm.
So, but you're giving option for the developers. Developer, you want to use UFI alone? Okay, please use UFI alone. You are already familiar and comfortable with AngularJS. Please, okay, use AngularJS. And if
Mm.
you want to complement, we are definitely providing all the controls available for to access as well. So for the developer, it's a benefit. So it is a win-win solution. You need not to struggle and learn only one framework. If you're already comfortable any framework, then you can better use. But the catch is it's not on the same page as UFI framework as on it, because I said there are only 100 controls out of
The
850.
real catch is for those who doesn't know the three of it, like me. I'm like, I don't know Vue, I don't know Angular.
So correct. That's the reason we are starting with basics. So if you do JavaScript,
I'll
our
stick to JavaScript.
that's better. I'm trying to say these are like new approaches. So if you are nowhere, you're starting with, you're pretty much, you can choose any track. So that's the
Mm.
whole takeaway from this
Mm.
approaches of, because direction can change. Today maybe they are supporting web components. Tomorrow um, maybe it may not be, users are not very much ready to accept this particular change. So even there should
Mm.
be strong demand for this particular use case, right? If
Mm.
developers are also not very much interested, no, I don't think we worth investing, this kind of everything. So
Right.
it's always we cannot say that it is going to a winnable solution in the long run. So SAP also sees for the considerable time, and there are like solid developers and customer requirements that okay, I think this platform is really good and I think this we can use it. And if they feel that this is working solution, then SAP also invests its resources in building equally. Like right now,
Mm.
uh, SAP UFI framework, it did not evolve overnight. So if you see here,
Yeah, it's a work in
1.87,
progress.
it's still a work in progress. It's not completed, and
Mm.
it took some time to build this much of control. Initially there were like
Wow.
hardly any controls, and now 1.87 it came around like on 4 to 5, I think around some 6 years at least it took to reach 1.87. So similarly web components also, it's just a journey which started in 2020, if you ask
Mm.
me precisely. So if
Wow.
this works, then you have these kind of solutions which you can build uh, irrespective of the framework. So this is how the frameworks will give the advantage, and this is the latest in this particular space, right? Okay. So we understood benefits of frameworks and how frameworks will simplify our development effort. Now, if you someone who is interested to bring all his objective is build excellent UI, okay, then at his dispose he can use all UFI controls. So he has a combination of 850 controls, okay, and plus if he knows any angular controls which he thinks, suppose some solutions which he sees like in UFA you cannot build, so maybe this use case can be built better in AngularJS, and you have access to AngularJS controls as well. So it's like plus additional controls you are able to see, correct? So this gives you more access to controls. So this is what in short we are trying to understand from this availability of other web components approach. Okay. But as a basic application building, we can just stick to SAP UFA framework, and this is long supported, and it is very stable product. Okay,
Mm.
this is very stable product. So it's always important to pick for live production scenarios to pick a stable product. So these are not stable products. If you ask me web comment, it's definitely not a stable product, because only 100 controls using which if you typically start building an application where you find certain controls are not available, and again all your work gets stopped in between, correct? So maybe we have to see a practical way as well. So in a practically, when you're trying to build production use cases, what kind of issues we might face, whether it's able to address all the scenarios also, that's also a key debate. So maybe AngularJS, when you're trying to use, maybe the certain areas, there might be some gray areas which we cannot actually visualize outright. So then generally it's always good practice to go with stable product right now, and gradually we have to keep watch on these new approaches which are coming in the market as well. So that is always a good approach. So certain use case, when you're building, always assume you're building for the client on UFA frameworks. Now you know that you can leverage AngularJS. Suppose the solution can be built in AngularJS, then we can very much say that yes sir, we have SAP support for those areas as well. So if we have resources, definitely we can build application. So we need to know, right, that we can use such a way is also available. So for that purpose we are trying to understand this. Okay, so now as a quick now again this particular 1 lakh plus T codes we have. So SAP UFA framework is not yet done, so there are like lots of things SAP has to do. In this edition I'll just add one more line. So this is completely off topic of this particular one. Even as for HANA product, it's still a work in progress product, if you ask me.
Mm.
SAP HANA, though it is a flagship product, and it in 2015 onwards it came into existence. Okay, actively existence. So it's relatively 5-year roadmap we have right now. So there were lots of problems, like SAP ERP is the hit product. If you ask me, it has been existing from since 2000. So around 50, every product generally every 15 years, SAP tries to bring in some new features and improvements, etc. So around mid of 2000s, etc., it came into picture, and 15 years it's sustained. So it's like extension of it. R3 afterwards, SAP ERP business suite was. So, but S4 HANA, they try to remove certain legacy modules, etc. And here, how this implemented is they called it S4 HANA Core. So when I say S4 HANA Core, some of the functionalities which were existing available in ERP, they either modified or they removed, and they suggested to go for different approaches. So all the ERP products are not straight away supported in Core, because they improved certain process, maybe old ways of doing, etc., and they clubbed certain areas. And what they said is they have given at those time, even now also, multiple areas. So suppose a solution doesn't fit in S4 HANA today, and it supports customer is using an ERP. Suppose SAP ERP, when they're using it, maybe there could lots of modules and lots of scenarios could be there. Suppose there's a vendor who provided a solution on ERP, and he doesn't have a solution on S4 HANA. So what's the catch? How do we deal with certain scenarios? You're getting right. So suppose you have like there could some old regulations which was in back in 2000s or 2005 or etc. And it was built on SAP ERP product as an add-on. Now that as on S4 HANA, you do not have this add-on. It supports only the old one. So how do you meet those scenarios? So there are like a number of possible use cases are still pouring and being coming on S4 HANA. And to build some quick point of solutions, if you have any old solutions, also legacy solutions, those can be using SAP Fiori, etc. We can connect. See, you can still connect your old system to your S4 HANA could be your front-end server gateway, and you can still connect to your old product, and you can build new solution on top of it as well. If you see FES and BES, we have see this way we have seen FES architecture and BS. In your case, our BS still could be SAP ERP product, okay, but your front-end server could be on S4 HANA. You're understanding, right? So we
Yeah.
can build Fury apps, etc., and you can still use rich UI, and still you can leverage until S4 HANA. We have some working add-ons, etc., available, and we can still leverage the existing ERP backend. So all your data, add-ons, etc., are as good as they're still working. So you can still start using it until you have a newer version available on S4 HANA, etc. So this bridges the gap of necessity to quickly upgrade to S4 HANA for all your backend. See, there might be lots of existing businesses working, which is a very stable. So again, we are talking about stability. So business is very stable, and they do not want to risk in hurriedly getting migrated to S4 HANA because they know that there are certain add-ons are not available in S4 HANA. So customer will be reluctant to immediately migrate to S4 HANA. Maybe he might use certain features of S4 HANA which will benefit his business. At the same time, he'll still continue to use the old product because it still does his job pretty much stable way. Correct. So customers do not have to always migrate to latest one. If your Windows operating system, again I talk about this, so if your Windows 7 is working very well, if you are not at all interested in any new fancy stuff, Windows 10 Windows has launched, but it doesn't mean that user has to upgrade to Windows 10 the moment it is launched. Correct. So customer has his own way when he want to opt and when he wanted to switch as such. So SAP does the same thing. So what he's saying is, if you wanted to migrate as on date, we are not forcing you. So they say that SAP ERP now it is supposed to end in 2023, now extended to 2030. That means till 2030, all solutions which are delivered for SAP ERP will be both parallelly at the same time they'll be supported. That means you have solutions, certain use cases which has to be run on old and certain solutions which will be running on new, and there's a mix of scenarios. So all the gap we can bridge using try to bridge using SAP Fury as well. So this is where certain use cases can come into picture. You're able to relate, right? So how the scenario
Yeah.
even as for HANA product, this is they are providing one product as on-premise and another product as for HANA Cloud as well. As for HANA Cloud, he's not at all a very stable product. I don't know. I haven't used it for any customer directly, but as for HANA, see, they are all the solution which you're seeing on on-premise. See, maybe what are add-ons, everything they are trying to provide exclusively online. So you need not to maintain your on-premise systems. Online in the sense as a cloud subscription. Business technology platform is different, and a complete solution in the cloud is a different thing. So these are two different offerings. Okay. So this product also they are trying to build. So any new solutions, if you straight away use this, it's very easy to build applications. So for that purpose also this RAP and SAP RAP CAP are being introduced. If you see CAP model, programming model, they're meant for building for S4 HANA Cloud or Ariba Cloud, etc. These are like non-SAP products. So there are like lots of ecosystem in SAP. There is not just one single ecosystem. Future needs might demand us to use newer technology tools, etc. And we have to be ready to know that which tool to use for which product, SAP product. So we are always talking about simple product called customer is always using SAP on-premise, and we are going to build applications to it. That's not the case. You'll have customers at various stages. Customer could be on ERP and he might be using S4 HANA at the same time. At the same time, he might be using cloud as well. He might be using all the three products of SAP. He might be using acquired products like SuccessFactors, etc. So SuccessFactors is a cloud product of which SAP acquired, and they might be
Right.
using all three products. Maybe for payroll management, they might be using this one, and maybe for managing pay slips, etc., or for hiring purpose, they might be using ERP product. They can use any product of SAP. It's customer choice. If he has, he will be using it. But it's not the same development for all the three. For if you want to build a GUI T code or report anything, you definitely use ABAP, right? And if you are for the cloud solution, if you have to build SuccessFactors has Java based programming model as well, and SAP supports tight integration with some of the Fiori kind of scenarios as well. I'm not sure, I haven't worked specific success factor related on the cloud integrations anything, but SAP has offerings. Okay, what I'm saying is it may not be always the same programming language will be used in all the products of SAP products. Okay, but definitely for ERP and S4 HANA, you know, ABAP will be the bread and butter for the backend part, and for the UFI, Fiori will be the de facto. And there could be other technologies as well. It's always not the thumb rule that everything can be built using only one programming language, or there is no demand for other programming developers or anything. Every developer has their own space. There is huge line of SAP products, and everything for building everything, every technology has its own place. So this is what we are able to understand. And okay, just quick. So how should we approach? So then we were talking about, we are trying to see that, okay, so then is it worth learning UFA, or is it worth learning ABAP, or is it worth learning any of the Java stack, etc. So everything has its own place. So how our mindset we have to generally prepare is, we need to focus on the base, like HTML, CSS, JavaScript if you are familiar. So S4 HANA product by default, it all the solutions are supported on S4 HANA. So like it is just 5 years, so 10 more years, generally 10-15 years, S4 HANA product will be supported. If you see now as a roadmap, so ERP is supported till 2030. Assume how long S4 HANA will be supported. So it's just 5 years in the lane. So at least next 10 years, S4 HANA product is going to stay. And by default, all S4 HANA product solutions are offered in SAP Fiori. So SAP Fiori is going to stay a thumb rule minimum of 10 years. Okay, this is a wild guess. Okay, so you're going to have these solutions, customers will be all the old customer coming into S4 HANA or S4 HANA, and old solutions we might be building. So there are plenty of transaction codes where we have only 12,000 apps. And if you see 12,000 apps is very small number when you have lakhs of T codes in your existing ERP product, correct? So we are seeing enormous demand for building use cases. And as for, I mean, SAP Fiori developers or community is as good in demand as developers. So developers, there is nowhere that without developer we can do complete implementation. So ABAP has its own place, Fiori has its own place. So this is a place. So there are lots of T codes. There's long support timeline, and still the Fiori apps are just 12,000. So there are bunch of use cases which can be built, and customers are really eager for resources who are familiar with both ABAP as well as Fiori as on date. So if you have both skill set, then you're hot cake. You will be easily, no question asked. All they ask is when you can build and how to build. They'll ask you these questions. They'll not ask you, they'll not test your skills, because they know that people coming with both the skill set, and these new skill sets are limited in resources. Though many people have both the skill set, they may be either strong in one area and they might be weak in other area. So it's always balancing the skill set. If you are good in both ABAP as well as UFI Fiori, then next 10-15 years you have huge demand outside in the market. So this is in short I can summarize. And as an approach, when you're starting as a fresh now we know HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Prepare OpenStack developer mindset. That means you don't stick to the controls, don't memorize or anything. So you should be able to apply this concept to any framework. Keep it like open approach. So today, if you have to build a solution, tomorrow if you want to build, if all the languages, Angular, etc., everything uses JavaScript, I said, right? So you can apply these concepts to any programming language. So I'm trying to separate our concepts, etc., in a open way. So you can, if you understand in a generic way. So as MVC concept, when I say, you can apply that concepts to any programming language. And when we say adding functions and reusable code, like external JavaScript, I said, right? That functions you can decouple and you can save it in separate JS file. Then you can use it and carry it in any programming language, right? So your logic is preserved. So why we talked about external JavaScript is all your functions, if you write say for some function or calculator, some division, etc., be it any programming language, that logic won't change. Logic is in JavaScript is always the same. So you can carry your JavaScript code and you can place it in as a library and reusable code, and you can use it in any framework. So that is I mean, better approach. You understand writing logic and don't understand how the framework or how the templates are. Don't look at the code, look at the logic, and don't look at how the structure is complex. For us, it's always just that function block. Whatever we are writing, on clicking it, what is the logic it has to execute? We should understand as a decoupled way. Concentrate only on the logic and don't look at the framework, how many files are there, what are the folder structure, etc. Do not actually pay attention to that. Understand what that, how to use those I mean, available tools. That's it. So a short snap, like one more area is like Fiori Launchpad. We have seen in Fiori 3, this is a new approach where we can have our tiles and charts, etc. There is one more new concept called UI cards. Maybe too much of information I'm sharing, but these are something new in the market. Like web components completely new in Fiori 3, and we have something called UI cards as well. So here in UFI.tool section, you'll find web components link as well. And it's at the same time, this is a card explorer. So if you have seen overview page, and there was some customer demand was there. Like overview page had limitations that only for one application we had to do. So if you see here in Fiori 3, so the card layouts which you are able to see here. So here there is a chart, everything, right? So these all built using UI cards. UI cards is a new way of designing cards on the launchpad. If you we have seen so far in Fury 2.0 that only tiles are available, right? So basic design is supporting. So even as on date, I have accessed S4 HANA 2020 edition, and Fury 3 is this particular cards, etc. are not yet rolled out, but very soon they'll launch this particular new set of controls, etc. So as on date, this is Fury 2.0. So in most of the places in S4 HANA product also, all the solutions we are seeing it this way. But how in the future we are going to have and how we are going to see in very soon in coming quarters as such. Okay, it's taking time to load. So this is how even this is S4 HANA. This is S4 HANA product itself. So S4 HANA product. This is how the Fury end user solutions which we maybe custom solutions, maybe SAP standard Fury applications. All the applications we generally deploy it and to the customer end users will be using this way, right? So here you are able to see only tiles and you are not able to see any graphical simulations, etc. In Fury 3.2 with the help of UI integration cards. So this is a newer set of cards which were introduced. So you have lots of cards. So these all cards, if you see, these are how if you want to use a table card, etc. This is how you'll use the cards. So this new concept they have brought in Fury 3, and we can straight away use it on the home page itself. So for this purpose, they introduced something called previously they used to call as groups and catalogs. Now the concept of spaces has been introduced in Fury 3.0. Okay. So Fury
These
3.0.
also have like HR related items as well. The
Yes, yes.
cards, UI cards.
UI cards we have. So this is actually this whatever I'm discussing are not yet rolled out in the market yet.
Mm. But
Okay,
it will also become available for pretty much all the modules, right?
all the
Like
modules.
HR.
Yes, every module. See, SAP solutions are meant for every module. It's not any
Mm,
specific to module as such.
mm.
What we are discussing is, which will be rolled out in 2021, Q3, Q4, etc. And as on date, right, I said previously because of COVID, etc. Also, they're taking a staggered manner. They're not rushing customers with lots of new features because customers are used to these particular approaches. It's and they do not want to confuse users. So if select users ask for very niche features, etc., then they are definitely showing that they are offering these additional point to point. But definitely in a very short time we'll be able to see. So we are trying to understand if you have to wanted to build Fury 3.2 features as well. If your customer asks, what's the latest in Fury space and what more you can offer, then definitely we can, web components and UI cards are the new features coming in Fury 3 space. And this is how our new uh, launchpad looks like. See, these are your existing old way of tiles looks. Along with it, to complement it, this is how the cards comes into picture. You are seeing this. This is a list card. This is table card, and directly if you see there's an approve button here, so you can select and directly you can approve it without actually going into the application. So those kind of point-to-point solutions, additional solutions can be achieved using UI cards. So even I haven't actually played around much with UI cards because there are not much. This is how they have explained is it's less just a configuration. I'll show you the project structure, then I'll come back how to define these cards, etc. It's not actually strict coding kind of like annotations, similar approach for UI cards. They are following it, where you can straight away define which card to use, etc. And you have to map the relevant data to it. So it's just a kind of simple approach they have given to implement these kind of tools. I'll talk in detail, but these are something new. Web components, UI cards are something new, which are coming in picture in Fury 3. Clear? So, I mean, we are talking about frameworks, what this SAP UFA frameworks new offerings are. Now we came back to your UFA framework, and UFA is the latest. Okay. So, and one more thing is in Fury 3, I previously also have mentioned. So these are like Ariba is acquired product. So this is a cloud exclusive product. This is for omni-channel and etc. So business to business, B2B, B2C scenarios, Ariba product is very popular product. Like uh, you are in suppose an aerodynamics or any you're Boeing or Airbus company, and you manufacture in complete aircraft, but in individual engines, etc. And there might be so many other suppliers and vendors, right? So that is a business to business. You got an order to supply 10 aircrafts, and Airbus or Boeing will again they'll give a contract to some other vendors who are specialists in exclusively in engines, who are exclusively specialist in certain components and accessories, etc. So it's these all are like huge orders, so they incur lots of business. If you have to ship on, if you got a contract and you say that on Q4 2022 I'm going to deliver your all your Boeing 737 Max or anything aircraft, if he says, that means he has to book the all his components and should be delivered upfront, right? So there are like n number of organizations, not only this particular scenario, many so those kind of scenarios, B2B and even e-commerce, if you see take Flipkart or Amazon, etc., all of them are like B2B, B2C. But for e-commerce, we have separate particular Hybris. So SAP Hybris, I think it's not listed here, but SAP Hybris is generally used for e-commerce. Okay, and Ariba is meets this B2B and business. So business gives again contract to another business. So again business to customer, etc. So there will like a number of companies using SAP's products. So Ariba is specialist in those area, and Ariba product is being used. So Ariba Fieldglass similarly for travel, etc. I think it's for meant for certain mm, invoices handling, etc. And as for HANA product is, or we know ERP's new version. This is just SAP's own product. Rest of the products are acquired, either acquired or they were you know outright purchase. SAP sees whichever is going ahead of its curve, it will directly acquire it because it has the muscle to buy anything. Okay, so most Concur is acquired product, SuccessFactors is acquired product. This is in HR space. Okay, and maybe it's not. I mean, acquired has been acquired in some years back itself, but still all the products are like cloud products. Now only S4 HANA used to support in SAP Fiori. Now all the products are integrated into Launchpad in Fiori 3. That means you'll have same look and feel. Maybe you can still build in Java itself. For SuccessFactors, they might be using Java, and they can SAP now start supporting UFA Fiori as well for some of the solutions. So you can, because they are like web applications URL, you can straight away give side by side your success factor you can access, and you can provide a launchpad tile as well, which is built in UFA as well, right? Because your success factor is getting integrated into your launchpad. So here, if you see this icon over there, so your success factor, etc. Now you will select on corner and your applications are deployed under the launchpad. So you'll see all your success factor applications as well. That means you can create your Fiori application and you can integrate straight away along with your success factors. Customer doesn't know. He'll see the same look and feel. Just like how I have shown you this, whether it is built in React or anything, nobody knows. Ultimately, what they get is the same look and feel. So for the success factor, all the cloud products, SAP in Fiori 3 is going to introduce now. Right now, this is how. See, it has some green and this has some black and white. This has corner has some blue. These are different color options, theme options, and different landing pages they have. So for everything, they had to log into different systems, etc. So all these things are getting integrated in Fiori 3. In Fiori 3, you'll have a central launchpad. Be it S4HANA product, be it any SAP product, all products can be single point of access is Fiori Launchpad. It comes with smart assistant called Copilot. It comes with all the SAP products. So your gateway for any business, if they want to use, simply they have to log into one place to access all their products. So that is a good move, if you ask me. So and it gives a flexibility to design on now your Fiori applications to all cloud products as well in a much easier way, because you're already familiar with building and deploying onto Launchpad. The same solutions can be integrated because they are URL based standalone. Integrating into any application is very easy. So they can be decoupled, because running on a browser, all you need to do is you have to configure this particular URL. So that's the advantage of. Uh, so going forward, all the cloud products are also being will be available on Fiori Launchpad, and we can use SAP Fiori as well. So this is about people who do not know about SAP products and S4HANA. I just ask them to check on SAP.com is a place where we can check. So if you want to try S4HANA product on the cloud as well, this is a trial edition. So you can log on to S4HANA cloud trial and you can check S4HANA apps. But make sure that it has only 14 days of trial. So if you wanted to check S4HANA cloud, how it looks, etc., we can check S4HANA cloud. Okay, so I think this is a wrap up of about frameworks, etc. Quickly, what I'll do is we'll see a quick demonstration. I'll just show one custom application. I think I already run this. So now we learned about the theoretical part and what's new about frameworks. So how MVC concepts, I introduced about MVC, but how MVC concepts is in practical implemented. So I created one simple login. If I were to design a login application in UFI, how would it design? So in this case, I am logging with one credentials and just I say this is successful logged in. And now if I enter incorrect password, etc., it says please verify username password is incorrect. So if you say I have written a simple logic to authenticate, and how did we build this particular login screen, and how did we use MVC concepts? So this is a practical way we'll try to understand. So I'm going to show how we are going to design this particular application. And now we understood theoretically how the framework helps. Now we are seeing inside the application how the MVC is structured. If you see, um, you can create a command palette, open application generator, and here when we are selecting it, we have to select freestyle application development because we are building from scratch. So we want to build everything from scratch. So how do we build this? We're using freestyle application. It's taking time to load, just a minute. So in order to build a login page, first you have to select freestyle. Okay, elements is you cannot make any changes. So freestyle is a place where you can. So now we can pick any of the template, but for the login screen, I wanted an empty page. So I'm just preferring SAP UF application. So this is an empty application. So in Visual Studio Code, when you come to view and command palette, search for SAP Fiori uh, or Fiori you can search, then you have open application generator. So in that, after selecting it, freestyle, if you select, you can select UFA application. So you can select next, and here you can skip this step because for the login screen we don't need any OData service. You can just click on data service none, and view name you can give any name you want. I can call it as main or home page, anything, any name. So our view name will be, this is the name. So just notice in the MVC framework, the view name we are calling it as home, and corresponding control will be auto created. And we are going to give a project name. Here I'm going to say as login page. App title is, I'm going to call it as MVC concept. Namespace, make sure to remember the namespace. Whatever namespace you're giving for all the application, just remember to use the same namespace, because running your application, it always your this module name will be prefixed with this particular namespace, so you have to remember your namespace. Just make sure you use common word, any word whatever you're preferred. So always I try to use.
Projects we create, it will be the same. Multiple projects share the same application namespace.
Yes, yes. So it's just a folder under UX folder. All these projects will be placed. That's the only difference. Namespace. Like if you say as UX, then UX folder, you'll find all the projects. So you give your project name. You can consider as module name. So module name here refers to your individual projects. Whenever you're giving, you have to make sure that you're keeping this unique. Don't give the same name. Suppose first time you're creating it, it might give you default name called HTML5 module, etc. If you retain the same name, problem is for all applications you'll have the same name, and when you're running the application, uh, you might face issues because you're not maintaining unique names. Okay, try to make module name unique. So whatever scenario you're building, this is your project name, you can consider.
It's like
And
the package name that we give in ABAP, right?
correct, this is the package, correct. They call it as namespace here, that's it. So right now deployment configuration etc it does, you can just keep it as no, not required. So all we did is we just created one name of our project we have given, and we have defined a namespace, that's it, nothing much. So this template automatically builds the MVC folder structure for us. So it organizes all the project files, etc. So previously we used Notepad to do all this manual activity. Now it is automatically creating this nice folder structure. If you say this controller files, now we created a home view. So this is a view folder, this is the model folder, and this is the control folder. So control folder has our JavaScript files. So here we can write all our JavaScript logic, right? And in the view folder, we have home.view. See, these are all XML tags. So XML tags, when I say, these are like SAP UFA, all the tags are built using XML. So if you say page, you should have a corresponding closing page tag. If you have content, you should have corresponding content close tag. So the same tag you can use slash then, or you can use this syntax. So that's a short form of using syntax. So every tag which you're using opening tag, you should have a closing tag. All the HTML concepts, but custom tags we call it as XML. So the view we'll write in XML, controller logic will write in JavaScript, and the model, in our case, this model resides. It doesn't reside here. It resides in the gateway. So in the front end server we have gateway component, right? So SHW if you have created will directly call, and the data resides always in the backend. So we are going to register the OData service. Right now I have set the OData service as none. If I have set a OData service, then the metadata file will be available here. So all our data will be available in the model folder, and all our JavaScript logic will be available in the controller folder. Whenever we create a view name with the home view, it has a corresponding control automatically created, right? And if you see, there is a CSS folder. So all the CSS styles, if we want to write, we are going to write here. Ideally, we should not write, but if at all we had to use one or the other CSS, then we can use this particular CSS folder. And one beautiful concept which SAP gives built-in is I18. I18 is meant for handling, all the language. Globally, SAP applications will be used, right? So you want your application to support Chinese language, to support German language. So one simple concept to what SAP UFA framework provides is you define what are the text. See, now here we used we used MVC concepts as a title, and you use username and password. So these kind of any button on the button name login we have, these static text, if you separate it from the application and you place it in a separate folder, then the single file, if I translate it, if I maintain multiple language files, then it application automatically works in different language. So what we are going to do is the title instead of here, I'm going, sorry. So what we are going to do is instead of title now, if I run this application, if you see, it will take a while to run. Okay. So we just built basic template. And then this is how our empty application looks like. See, there's a title here and it is empty. Now what I'm trying to say is, so we can have this title. Now I'm naming it as MVC. Okay. So if I name it as MVC, automatically it will deploy it. So if you see, you got MVC. Now this text, whatever text we are having it, all the text in SAP we maintain in a separate folder called I18 file. Now, if I have to run this application in German or anything, all I have to do is I have to create one more file. So I'll create a new file called this folder, this new file, I18 n dot. So for German, I'll say de properties. Property. Okay, done. So I18n is default English language. For German, I'll just use some translator, and then we have something called translation hub service in cloud platform as well. We can use it. For your case, you can simply use Google Translate, and here I'll say MVC concepts, and I can select. Okay, so this text, okay, maybe certain words might be abbreviations we may not have, so MVC will be answered. So concepts in German is this way. So now if we run this application, so at and the launchpad, if you see, I'll just log out here just to show here. So when during deployment, these files will be automatically available. So here you see on the long language, you have option to select German as well. So Dutch, etc. So when you log in, automatically your application loads. How does it load? In the back, we have to maintain this I18 file with multiple language structure as such. When we maintain those particular, if you see, I think here you saw here some its language has been changed with certain. Maybe some of the translation files are not available, so all the tiles are not appearing. But as long as if you maintain the translation file, so your applications are available globally in their own local language. That's the advantage of the framework, right? So you understood, right? Now you see this name. So here are the group names, etc. This is main group, etc. was there. So they were translated. So in your application, if you maintain, then it will appear. If not, always it will appear in English. So this is how we can build applications which are specific to local language as such. So nothing changed. All you have to change was your text, you keep it in separate file and maintain different language. If you have globally which are country you are releasing, just maintain this translated files here and your application is good to go. And we one more folder, we have local service. This is a model service additional file itself. You can follow the local service if you are using some mock data like for testing purpose. So we can use this local folder, like using static text we can play around. So I'll explain in subsequent exercises how and exactly we'll use local service, etc. But you can understand that this is related to maintain your data locally. Okay. And testing, like all the unit testing and any application, when we do, we use this particular built-in files. So integration test, unit testing, we have options. Instead of running application, what we'll do is, if you see, we had option, right? In preview application, do you want to run unit tests? Do you want to run integration test? So there's a framework, I'll explain on the testing how we do, etc. But if you are running an application, if you use unit testing, it will refer to this particular folder called test folder. So this is meant for unit testing. Now this is a core file where or actual index file. So we talked about bootstrapping, right? That bootstrapping the single page application are, that was the theory. This is in practical, you have a single HTML file for this whole application. Okay, we are using just simple HTML file. We have seen in the basic exercise in HTML how we added tags and how we added CSS, etc. In the framework, this script tile allows you to load all your 850 controls. This simple source called resource tag, SAP added core.js, this is your whole framework. What are controls we are seeing here, right? So all these API reference controls, all these controls are bundled in single JavaScript file. So all controls are written and they are shipped in a simple file called sap.core.js. See, main base libraries which are required for building blocks, those are available, and additional libraries will load as modules. So how to load as modules, I'll just explain in a moment. But see your framework, where is your framework? This is where your framework is. And how your response applications are achieved, because this framework inbuilt has the bootstrap concept in it inbuilt. So if you're using these controls, automatically we're getting the responsive application. So if you see, head tag was there and the title has login page and this simple script tag and then again a body. This is it. That's it. This is only a piece of code which is stitching all your MVC folders into a single index file.
Mm. Yep.
And the theme part, what are we saw, blue crystal theme, etc. Here the theme, at that theme tag, if you change to blue crystal, Belize, etc., automatically it will change you to different theme. In this case, there is a dark theme out there, so it will automatically, if I change it, if I see here, it got changed to black. So changing the theme is pretty much easy. We have separate tool as well, theme designer, using which we'll change the theme, but you need not to touch anything. So everything in a single file, you can manage it. In index file now, if I wanted to go with any other theme, I'm able to switch it, and whichever you have a version you want to run, also we can run it. This framework within which, if you wanted to run on old version, etc., also you can run. And for that we use manifest. I'll go there in a minute. And if you see all our modules, so initially they are referring to, there's a, in the body tag they have framed called one div tag. They all the places one div tag, and it is referring to SAP UID component. So earlier we used to use component for maintaining OData service URL. So where is which OData service to use, etc. But that has been moved on to manifest. So component now points to one single file called manifest.json. So if you see here, first line is manifest, refer to JSON. So nothing much will be there. Here in component, it's now dummy. Everything is moved on to manifest. So manifest is the crux of our whole application. So index is the one which will run the application, and all the folder structure, which folder to use what, and how, what all OData is there, which version UEFI is running, everything is maintained here. So if you see by default, I18, which property file I have to refer, I18N. If you want by default to German, you have to change it to German. Okay, this descriptable file will tell you what are your default properties. But when you are loading an application, which are the parameters which runtime should read and understand to generate the application accordingly. Always make sure your ID should be unique irrespective of which are the project you're using. Never use the same ID for two different applications, because when you're deploying your application, the tile on the launchpad uniquely will be identified only based on your ID. If you have duplicate IDs, which is now if I click on this particular tile, runtime should understand, right? So I'm clicking on approve purchase order. So unless you provide a unique ID for each of your tile, so how you define in the manifest? The manifest, your ID should be unique. So that's the reason by default it is namespace dot your module name. So that's the reason I mentioned you to maintain module name unique. If you are maintaining module name unique, automatically your ID is also unique, right? So in the wizard, initially I have mentioned to use module name. So this is your project name and the
Mm.
namespace. So if you are using your module name unique, you're ensuring that your ID is unique. When your ID is unique, your tiles are unique. And then your launchpad, when you're deploying it, you'll not face any issue at all. So this is a simple thumb rule. Make sure to have your ID unique. How do you ensure it is unique? You keep all your module names different name. Okay, make it appropriate names. Okay, this is one simple parameter. And now you wanted to run in specific UFA framework. Now here you can set the dependency minimum version 1.66. Suppose you are using all the controls which are released. Suppose some controls were released in 1.87, some controls are released in 1.7, and you're using those controls. Then you have to explicitly maintain that minimum version required to run this particular application is 1.88 as such. So this is where we set the minimum UFA version requirements, etc. And if you want to load any additional libraries, so we can load external libraries as well. So in this case, by default, certain libraries will not be loaded, because to keep the application lightweight. Suppose you are not using in your application, you're just using simple text label, etc. controls. Then the core library, the core which you are using, this is a core library. We call it as core library. Core library alone is sufficient to meet those scenarios. If you want to load directly every time an application is loading itself, you can load all the libraries which you want to use here. So you can park this for the moment. You'll understand when we do subsequent exercises how we load new libraries, etc. Okay. So here you'll have routing information from which page to which page we are navigating it, and the CSS folder structure. This is where we have to refer, and even OData service when we add it will have OData services. So here this will give this, we call it as description descriptor. We'll call this manifest file, we'll call generally as descriptor file. So it gives complete information required for application to run. Okay. So this is how MVC structure we have, and let me show you the uh, when we start adding it. So how do we add? Just the same structure. Now I created in the view. Let me close. So I'm closing it and I'm opening a fresh. Now you understood the whole structure, right? So I have already created this. So just to show you.
Hmm.
So I created one simple function called login function, JavaScript function. I have written the logic of, this is a simple logic which I have written to authenticate. And the view, what I have done is I have taken a simple example. So in the page, what I try to do is I just try to add one label field which has username and one to enter the email ID and label and input. Say these are like to position to center, etc. I have used vbox, hbox, but technically what I use is one label and input field. Label field as username and input field where to enter the, and then I have created one more label field called password and input field as password. Okay, if you see here, uh, this is a small snippet. So if I add this content, simple content to hit in our view. So here in the content area, just I have added. So one label field and the input field. I'll explain more about how we use this all. If you see, this is a class. These are SAP UFI's standard CSS classes. So this is how we'll use CSS classes. So I'll explain tomorrow in detail. But today, all you can understand is we are just using some simple controls. Now let's see how it looks. So I just added. I think I haven't saved it. One second. So if it shows as black, that means it's not yet saved. If you see here, so make sure that we are saving. Then automatically changes will reflect here. So you see, we got the simple username and on label and input field and label and input field, and I have given two buttons with one called as login and sign up, right? So here you see I have given a button name login and another button called name with sign up. Now we are going to add provide some logic to it. What I'm doing is I'm saying press event. So when I click on login function, then execute this particular logic. So user has entered some values. When they click on login, then we are authenticating this entered username and password. So this login function we define in our main control. So our logic part is directly whenever you press on that button, it comes and checks for the logic in corresponding control. So if you have in this case, we have home view, right? So home view will check for home controller. So in this case, home controller, we have to add this particular piece of code. What I'll do is I'll create this particular function called login. So what's the logic we have written? If you see, I created a variable called mail ID. So what a field I have given in the view for the field called email, I have given an ID for input field called ID called mail. So whatever value is entered in value, we are just getting the value. Just like how we have seen the basic exercise in JavaScript. In UFI, this is how we do. This dot get you by ID get value. So entered value will be stored in this particular email and entered value in password field will be stored in this particular. Now I'm comparing these two. What I'm doing with basic check is check if it is not equal to empty. If it is empty, if they click on message, we should not allow. So it should not be empty, not equal to blank. And if mail and password, in our case, for this case of simplicity, whatever mail field you enter, the same thing should be entered in password. Then you are automatically logged in. Else it throws you a message called please verify username password is incorrect. So we have written a simple logic called entered username and password both should be same. Ideally, we'll have more robust, but to simplify the case, I just use a basic logic. Okay. Now, if you see our application, now if I enter as mm, RAM Ram, and if I enter exactly as RAM Ram, and then I click on login, then it will prompt. I think we haven't loaded some more libraries. So here it throws error. You can check inspect and you can check on the console. It says message box is not defined. So this message box which we used, this is external library. Now how do we load this external library? We have to add this library on the top. Okay, so let me quickly add this. So again I'll explain in detail how this library is to use, etc. But so if you now message box scp.m, there's a control called message box. Now we in controller we want to use it, we'll add that particular library on top. This is called module loading, and then we give any name. So what are your name you're giving for this particular control? In the order it should be, if it's in second position, it should have in the second order. So and this name we have to reference in where place we are using. Now I wanted to use this message control in the control, so I say message box dot. It has a property called success, etc. Okay. So now let's see if it works or not. So same RAM and I entered the password as RAM. I'll try to log in. Now it says you're logged in. So I got a success message. Now if I type anything other than what are username field and password differ, and if I click on login, it says incorrect username password, right? Clear how we have used JavaScript in UFI and how MVC framework is in practically implemented in the structure. So in detail, we'll do detailed access tomorrow, but to give a fair understanding that this is how MVC concepts are implemented and this is how in UFI framework we start adding logics. So if you see, our focus area is all on not on controls, not on anything. Our focus area is on build writing JavaScript logic. If you know that this simple logic, one line on 21, then all you did was you what is in the UI, what value is entered, you brought the value, and you are just comparing both the things. So our whole JavaScript logic was just 20 line 21. So this logic, if you have written whole application, what we did is just process. You need to understand the process, how to generate this particular layout, how to generate this particular structure, etc. Right? So this is as simple as building using UFA framework. Any questions?
No, nothing, but there was a lot actually, especially, the first, I mean, you said simple logic, but it is not simple, but yeah, I got to practice this other two sort of, yeah, but
No,
it
I'll
was a introduction.
go in detail. I'll go in detail because this is just for to show you like and on the
Mhm.
first class, we haven't yet talked about many. So just I want to show you like theoretically what we have talked. We talked about MSc and
Yeah,
we
it was
talked
a
about
very good
framework.
introduction by, and then also to be seeing this in a dark mode, right? I know we tried it one time before, and then now, we're able to like control the theme and everything. So it was a great introduction. And the user name and password was very easy to connect, when you sort of, because that's something that we also do, right? As
Correct.
end users.
So we'll see, in detail. So this was just first access we are doing. So we'll not understand many of the jargons, etc., and we'll not have much. But this is like basically how the building blocks are. So these all are
Mm,
building blocks. So
mm,
if you're building complex application or a simple application, for everything, this is the building blocks. In UFA framework, if you ask, basic folder structure would be that's how the folder structure would be. And on top of it, how much ever you're building it, it's just better organized. So now if you have to make any change, you'll know that you have to refer to the logic in controller folder. If you have to make any CSS change, you know that you have to make a change in, you have to go and refer to CSS folder. So it's
mm.
like organized, better organized.
The controller and the view, of the MVC, that's actually something that I think I may have to like take a lot of, sort of focus on, especially when we know where to make the code changes, right? And where to insert it between the main and
Mhm.
the controller. Yeah.
Okay. So this was another application which I already created. for demonstration. So we are referring was home itself. Main and home are not two different things. That's a different. So for showing you output, I just created login page one. In that I have
Mhm.
used as main. Now when we have done actually in V1, we have defined as home. So we have only one home view and one home control.
Okay. I got confused. Sorry.
So
Um,
just to make it, quick for if you see an output, then you can relate. So I created first to show you the output, and
mm.
then we have. That's the reason. Whatever view name in the wizard template you give, accordingly the names will be. You can. So we need not to bother about what are the names, etc. But first, if you see output, always we can relate. So that's the reason I showed you first output. This is how it looks as such.
Right,
Then
right.
we are trying
Yeah,
to understand.
correct.
Okay. Okay. Then tomorrow we'll see in detail about. I think not on Monday. Sorry. So
Uh,
probably let
yeah,
me.
sure.
Then this weekend you can. Let me give you one simple exercise. So so you can try using any OData service, Northwind service or any service,
Uh-huh.
and you can use wizard approach. Now we have seen the wizard, right? So you can
Mm.
go to command palette and you can use freestyle application now. Previously you have used elements, right? Select freestyle application, any OData service. Try to select Fury worklist application or master, any template, and try to use this wizard and just select OData service and give the OData URL. And you should be able to study this all folders and structure. For same structure, in this case, it should generate you working data example as well. Automatically, in your example, you should get this final output, which is a table control with all the data fields. Okay, just try to use the wizard and supply with an OData service and try to run some application. So you should have one working example ready-made, and you should be able to run the application. So this will be technically your first UF application, which will be freestyle application. You'll have a full-scale application. And this code of the login page also, I'll place it in GitHub. You can just try to practice how it is done. And on Monday onwards, we'll see exclusively on how we can build these kind of scenarios and examples. Some more examples we'll try to see and we'll understand. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Have a
Yeah.
good day.
Yeah. Thanks.
Bye.